This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julian Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability and a generous investment by Julian Wrigley.
And the final consideration I want to give you is this concept of spatial justice. And interestingly, British Member of Parliament David Lammy said, just as social justice requires that life chances are not distributed along class lines, spatial justice requires they are not distributed geographically. How many of you grew up in towns where one side of the railway tracks, things were very different from the other side of the railway tracks? Or cities where, cities where the north side or the south side or the east side or the west side, that literally one side of a road, one side of a wall was different. Now, I'm showing you here through the slides, some cities around the world are actually divided cities. Some cities are totally divided by a wall, but others are divided not by a wall, but by some sort of feature, like a railway line, a zone boundary or something like that. So spatial justice is, I think, something that you need to take seriously when you're planning and doing your work in sustainability and social justice. And one of the most powerful tools for looking at spatial justice is, of course, GIS. GIS has given us the power to see how social mobility, social opportunity happens in spatial contexts. And I want to give you two examples of spatial justice in terms of urban spaces. And the first is urban parks, and we're in a wonderful park here. But as Lowe, Taplin and Schultz said, that in this new century we're facing a different kind of threat to public space, not one of disuse, but of patterns of design and management that exclude some people, thereby reducing social and cultural diversity. So their point is that the way we design public space and the way we manage public space can affect who is in that space. Two examples, both of them from the United Kingdom. The picture of the park there is very much like a park that I was asked 20 years ago to look at by Hertfordshire County Council, which, for those of you who know, it's in the Green Belt just north of London. And the County Council was asking me to look at this park in terms of equity. They were saying, is there something we can do in this park, given that the people that are in this park are very different from those 150 years ago when the park was designed? And the first thing I noticed walking around was that most parks were designed around, and most parks still are, whether it's urban parks or whether it's, well, not so much urban parks, but certainly what's called a country park, which is the one I was looking at, or national parks, are designed around the sort of transcendentalist ideal of wandering. Two people and a dog, or, a kid, a family. But what I saw was extended family groups, large social groups of Asian, African, Turkish, Greek, Cypriot people. Parks were not designed, European and North American parks were not designed around this. Witness the seating arrangements. Most seats were for 2 to 4 people. There weren't seats in a forum for large groups of people. Where do people sit? And I reported this to the Parks Authority, that, that this park was designed around this notion, this transcendental ideal of wandering lonely and solitude. Whereas a lot of cultural and ethnic groups these days, they don't see nature and parks as being places of solitude and reflection. These are social spaces, places to have parties and have fun. That's a big difference culturally. And so a design issue then is, how do you design for large groups of people to be able to sit and converse? I don't see much in the way of evidence of that. The second issue was a management issue. Now, you'll notice most of this grass out here is what's called ryegrass. It's a very hard wearing, it's used for sports, it's used for people to sit on, it's just a general grass around the world that is used in in recreational settings. In one city in the southwest of Britain, Bristol, the local wildlife trust asked the park to embark on an experiment. The experiment was, let's create a wildflower meadow. Let's make that section of park a wildflower meadow. And so over about 2 years, they employed a management regimen to make the grass sward grow up, and all these wildflowers, native wildflowers, came in, and all the bugs, and it was a sort of a naturalist's dream. Everybody loved it. And then somebody noticed, where are the Asian and African Caribbean people that used to come in this park? Why aren't they coming in this park anymore? Clue: long grass, snakes. There's a residual fear of snakes amongst people certainly from the Caribbean, from Africa, and from India. So an ecological management regimen was having a negative cultural effect, a negative effect on the cultural diversity of the park. Now, I'm not saying that it was wrong to do this. We have to have ecologically sensitive areas. But what if one of the wildlife trust had been a member of a minority group? Or what if one of the park staff had said, hang on, are we going to create long grass here? That's going to be a no-no with certain cultural groups, just as dogs in parks are not very popular with Muslims, etc. My point is, there may not be answers for some of these questions, but we need to start asking the questions. If a wildflower meadow was the solution, what was the question that was asked? And we need to start asking some questions about our society. We know very well about the different recreational habits of different cultural groups. And so we need to start thinking about what I call culturally inclusive spaces. How do we create spaces that reflect the cultures now and into the future in cities? How do we do that? Because the theory behind this is that point in the middle paragraph there, contact theory. The theory is, the more contact we have with difference, with different groups, the more we will become tolerant and understanding of those groups. And that goes back to Allport's contact theory from 1954. But more recent research, published in the National Academy of Sciences, has shown that people who live in diverse areas are more tolerant. And that's not, and they actually controlled for those people who moved to diverse areas because that's where they wanted to live. They found that basically those people who were brought into contact with difference and diversity were more tolerant. And if we want to move towards those intercultural cities that I mentioned, and if we want this bigger sort of civic democracy, then we're going to have to think about creating spaces of encounter. How do we create spaces where people encounter each other, different groups meet? We can't go along just having different groups, different cultural groups in isolation. How do we bring them together? And it may be that we can think of ways of designing. Now, again, I'm not saying I have the answers here, but what we have to have is an urban design and a parks design profession that looks more like Phoenix today, or looks more like Boston today. That's my point about cultural competency and being more representative of the communities which you're serving.
This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julian Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability for educational and non-commercial use only.